Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Abandoned Konoha after the Sasuke Retrieval Arc. What if Naruto, the hero we know, left Konoha after his devastating failure to retrieve Sasuke? Imagine the hidden leaf without its brightest beacon, forcing new heroes and villains to rise. This isn't just a fan theory. It's a deep dive into an alternate reality where Naruto's choices reshape the entire ninja world. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. The border dispute between Kusagawa and Minami had been simmering for 3 years, ever since a drought had forced both farming communities to compete for water rights from the same mountain stream. What had started as neighborly disagreements over irrigation schedules had escalated into armed skirmishes, burned crops, and the kind of generational hatred that turned practical problems into blood feuds. Neither village could afford to hire ninja from the major hidden villages. The fees were astronomical and the politics complicated, but they could afford a freelance mercenary with a growing reputation for solving problems efficiently and permanently. That's where Naruto came in. The situation is intolerable, Heihachi, the village elder of Kusagawa, explained as he led Naruto through fields that showed clear signs of recent violence. Irrigation channels had been deliberately damaged, storage buildings had been burned, and several fields bore the scorched earth marks of fire jutsu. They attack our farmers in broad daylight, steal our supplies, destroy our infrastructure. We need someone who can make them understand that this aggression cannot continue. What kind of understanding? Naruto asked, though he suspected he already knew what the old man wanted. The permanent kind, Heihachi replied without hesitation. We've tried negotiation, mediation, even involving the local magistrate. Nothing works. They see our reluctance to escalate as weakness, our attempts at peace as invitation for further attacks. Listen to his words, Kit. This is how the world actually works, not through noble speeches about peace and understanding, but through demonstrations of superior force that make continued aggression too costly to consider. They reached a hilltop that provided a clear view of both villages, separated by perhaps 2 miles of disputed farmland and the stream that caused all the trouble. Minami was slightly larger, with newer buildings and better fortifications, suggesting they'd been winning the economic war that accompanied the physical one. "Show me what happened last week," Naruto said. Heihachi's expression darkened. 20 of their fighters hit our eastern fields at dawn, burned 3 storage buildings, destroyed the main irrigation pump, killed 2 of our young men who tried to stop them. They left a message saying it was retaliation for something we supposedly did to their livestock. Did you do something to their livestock? Of course not. We're farmers, not barbarians. But it wouldn't matter if we had. Every incident gets blamed on us. Every act of retaliation gets justified as necessary defense. Naruto studied the tactical situation with eyes trained by years of mission analysis. Minami held the high ground and better defensive positions. Kusagawa had more arable land, but was exposed to attack from multiple directions. The stream ran closer to Minami, giving them first access to the water that both communities needed. From a purely strategic perspective, Minami was winning because they understood that superior force trumped moral righteousness. Kusagawa was losing because they kept expecting fairness from people who had decided that victory mattered more than ethics. The stronger village takes what it needs, the weaker village suffers the consequences. This is the natural order that your village tried to hide behind pretty words about protection and justice. At least these farmers are honest about what they want. What exactly are you asking me to do? Naruto asked. End it, Heihachi said simply. Whatever it takes, however you need to do it. We can't live with this constant threat hanging over us, and we can't fight a war against people who don't honor the basic rules of civilized conflict. The contract was straightforward. Eliminate Minami's capacity for continued aggression in exchange for payment that would keep Naruto comfortable for months. No moral complexity about protecting the innocent or serving the greater good, just a simple transaction between people who wanted a problem solved and someone capable of solving it. I'll need detailed intelligence on their fighters, their defenses, and their daily routines, Naruto said. Already prepared. Heihachi produced a scroll containing maps, personnel assessments, and tactical analysis that was surprisingly thorough for farmers. We may not be warriors, but we're not fools. We know what kind of information professionals need. That evening, Naruto studied the intelligence while sitting in the inn room the village had provided. Minami had approximately 30 fighters of varying skill levels, mostly farmers with basic weapons training, but a few with genuine combat experience. Their leader was a former missing nin from Hidden Grass who'd settled in the village years ago and had been gradually militarizing their response to the water dispute. The missing nin was the real problem. Without his tactical knowledge and combat skills, the farmers would probably revert to the kind of low-level harassment that could be managed through deterrence rather than elimination. With him, they were capable of the kind of coordinated assault that had devastated Kusagawa's infrastructure. Remove the leader, and the followers lose both direction and confidence. Simple, efficient, effective. This is how real problems are solved, by identifying the source and eliminating it permanently. Just kill him, Naruto asked. Just kill him. His death will demonstrate to the others that their aggression carries consequences they cannot bear, while removing the strategic intelligence that makes their attacks effective. 2 problems solved with 1 action. The moral calculus was cleaner than anything Naruto had encountered during his village missions. No civilians to protect, no complex political considerations, no demands that he find non-lethal solutions to fundamentally lethal problems. Just a straightforward application of superior force to end a conflict that was destroying both communities. It was almost refreshing in its simplicity. Naruto struck just before dawn, when the guards would be tired and the village would be focused on preparing for the day's work rather than defending against attack. The missing nin's house was isolated on the village's eastern edge, positioned to provide early warning of assault from Kusagawa's direction. It was a tactically sound choice that unfortunately made the target easier to approach from unexpected angles. Naruto's enhanced speed and stealth capabilities, honed through weeks of operating without backup or support, allowed him to reach the building's roof without detection. From there, he could observe the interior through carefully created gaps in the tiles, mapping the layout and identifying the target's location. The missing nin was awake, sitting at a table reviewing what appeared to be plans for another attack on Kusagawa. He was older than Naruto had expected, perhaps 40, with the kind of scarred, weathered appearance that spoke of decades spent in violent pursuits. Not a desperate farmer driven to extremes by circumstances, but a professional warrior who'd found a new outlet for his skills. A predator who has discovered a hunting ground where his prey cannot effectively fight back. This is not a man driven by necessity, but by the enjoyment of domination. His death will be justice as much as strategy. Naruto dropped through the roof in complete silence, landing behind the missing nin with a kunai already in hand. The man had time to register the attack but not to prevent it. The blade went between his ribs and into his heart with the precision of surgical technique and the finality of executioner's judgment. What? The missing nin tried to speak, but blood was already filling his lungs. Kusagawa sends their regards, Naruto said quietly, though he doubted the man could still understand him. It was over in less than 30 seconds. Professional, efficient, permanent. Excellent technique, Kit. Clean, quick, decisive. This is how problems are solved when diplomatic solutions prove inadequate. Naruto searched the house briefly, collecting intelligence about planned attacks and tactical assessments that would be useful for preventing future conflicts. Then he began the second phase of his mission, ensuring that Minami understood the consequences of continued aggression. He moved through the village like a ghost, leaving signs of his presence without revealing himself directly. Storage buildings that were mysteriously damaged overnight, weapons caches that simply disappeared, guard posts where the sentries were found unconscious with no memory of what had happened to them. By the time the sun rose and the missing nin's body was discovered, Minami's capacity for organized assault had been systematically dismantled. Not through wholesale slaughter, but through surgical strikes that removed their ability to threaten Kusagawa while leaving the civilian population intact. The message was clear: continued aggression would result in escalated consequences that they were not equipped to handle. The village council of Minami requested a meeting that same afternoon. Naruto arrived at the designated neutral ground, a small shrine situated halfway between the two communities, to find a group of nervous farmers accompanied by what appeared to be their most senior warrior. They had the look of people who'd been forced to confront realities they'd previously been able to ignore. "You're the one Kusagawa hired," the senior warrior said. It wasn't a question. "I'm the one they hired to solve their problem," Naruto confirmed. "Kenji is dead, our weapons are gone, half our stored supplies have vanished." The warrior's voice was carefully controlled, but fear leaked through despite his efforts. We understand that you're capable of considerable efficiency. I'm capable of ending this conflict permanently if that's what's required, but I'd prefer a solution that allows both villages to focus on farming instead of fighting." The relief in their faces was obvious. They'd clearly expected demands for unconditional surrender or threats of complete destruction. "What are you proposing?" one of the council members asked. "Formal arbitration of the water rights dispute by a neutral magistrate, with both sides agreeing to abide by whatever decision is reached. Compensation to Kusagawa for the damage your attacks have caused, and a binding agreement that any future conflicts will be handled through legal channels rather than violence." Generous terms, Kit. You could demand much more from people who no longer possess the power to refuse. "And if we refuse?" the warrior asked. Naruto's expression didn't change, but something in his posture suggested that refusal would carry consequences that went far beyond their current problems. "Then I solve Kusagawa's problem using methods that are less diplomatic." The negotiation took 3 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Minami agreed to all of Naruto's terms, along with a substantial payment to him personally for mediating the dispute rather than simply eliminating their capacity for further aggression. By evening, both villages had signed formal agreements that would end the conflict and establish frameworks for preventing future disputes. The water rights would be arbitrated by a neutral authority, damaged property would be compensated, and both communities could return to the business of farming rather than fighting. It was, by any reasonable measure, a successful resolution to a potentially devastating regional conflict. So why did Naruto feel no satisfaction at having prevented further bloodshed and established lasting peace between the communities? Because you understand, as they do, that peace was not achieved through appeals to their better nature or demonstrations of moral superiority. Peace was achieved through the application of superior force and the credible threat of escalated consequences. "Is that wrong?" Naruto asked as he prepared to leave the area. "Wrong, right, these are concepts that matter only to those who can afford the luxury of moral purity. What matters is results, and the results speak for themselves. Two villages that were destroying each other in a pointless conflict are now cooperating in productive enterprise. The strong imposed order on the weak, and everyone benefits." As Naruto walked away from the shrine where the agreements had been signed, he passed groups of farmers from both villages who watched him with expressions that were part gratitude, part fear, and part something else he couldn't quite identify. Respect, perhaps, the kind of respect that came not from affection or admiration, but from recognition of superior power and the restraint he'd shown in not using it to its full potential. Power brings respect, not friendship. This is the way the world works when stripped of comfortable illusions. You solved their problem, ended their conflict, and established lasting peace. The fact that they fear you more than they like you is irrelevant to the success of your intervention. That night, camped in a forest several miles from both villages, Naruto found himself thinking about the mission with a satisfaction that had nothing to do with heroic ideals or moral righteousness. He'd identified a problem, developed a solution, and implemented it with clinical efficiency. The results spoke for themselves: peace where there had been war, cooperation where there had been conflict, order where there had been chaos. The methods he'd used would have horrified his former teammates and instructors, but the outcomes were objectively superior to anything diplomatic negotiation or moral suasion could have achieved. You are learning, Kit. Power without the willingness to use it is meaningless. Mercy without the capacity for ruthlessness is weakness. The farmers understand this now, even if they prefer not to acknowledge it openly. "I killed a man today," Naruto said, though whether he was making a confession or an observation wasn't entirely clear. "You removed a source of conflict that was destroying two communities, and would have eventually resulted in far more deaths than your single elimination prevented. The mathematics of violence are simple: one death now prevented dozens later." It was a pragmatic way of viewing the moral complexity of lethal force, and one that made considerably more sense than the abstract ethical frameworks his village had tried to impose on him. As sleep claimed him in his simple camp, Naruto dreamed not of the missing nin's death or the fear in the farmer's eyes, but of the signed agreements and the prospect of fields that would grow crops instead of hosting battles. It had been a good day's work, and if that work had been accomplished through methods that would have appalled the boy who'd once sworn to become Hokage, well, that boy had never been very effective at actually solving problems, had he? Sleep well, Kit. Tomorrow brings new opportunities to discover what you're capable of when freed from the constraints of false morality and institutional limitation. The world has many problems that could benefit from your particular skills. For the first time in months, that prospect filled him with anticipation rather than dread. The bounty hunter calling himself Rhaegar had been tracking Naruto for 3 days. Not that Naruto had been particularly trying to hide. His reputation as an effective freelance problem solver had spread through the underground networks faster than he'd anticipated, and with reputation came both opportunities and complications. Apparently, someone had put a price on his head substantial enough to attract professionals with the skills to actually pose a threat. The realization came when Naruto's enhanced senses detected the same presence at 3 different locations along his route toward the border between fire and hot water countries. Professional surveillance was one thing. He'd grown accustomed to being observed by various interested parties, but this felt different, more focused, with the patient persistence of a predator closing in on prey. We're being hunted, Kit. Whoever is tracking us has considerable skill and specific intent. This is not casual observation or intelligence gathering. How dangerous? Naruto asked, though he continued walking along the forest path as if unaware of the surveillance. Very, the stalker's chakra signature suggests significant combat experience and specialized techniques. Not a desperate amateur seeking easy money, but a professional who believes himself capable of collecting whatever bounty has been placed on our head. The confirmation of Naruto's suspicions came that evening, when he made camp beside a mountain stream and his tracker finally decided to reveal himself. Uzumaki Naruto, a voice called from the darkness beyond his campfire's light. Also known as the Ninetales Jinchuriki, former ninja of the Hidden Leaf, current freelance mercenary with a growing reputation for efficient problem-solving. The man who stepped into the firelight was unlike any bounty hunter Naruto had encountered before. Tall and lean, with wild hair and eyes that held the kind of focused intensity that came from years spent in life-or-death situations. Most notably, he carried paired swords crackling with electrical energy, lightning-based weapons that suggested both considerable skill and access to rare equipment. Rhaegar of the 7 Swordsmen, the man continued, his weapons humming with barely contained power. Former Hidden Mist, currently unaffiliated. I believe someone is paying very well for your capture or elimination. Naruto recognized the title if not the individual. The 7 ninja swordsmen of the Mist were legendary for both their skill and their brutality. Elite warriors who'd earned their reputation through decades of successful assassinations and small-scale wars. If one of them was hunting him, the bounty on his head was substantial enough to attract genuinely dangerous professionals. Capture or elimination? Naruto asked, standing slowly with his hands visible but ready to reach for weapons. Which pays better? Capture actually. 50% bonus for bringing you in alive. Rhaegar's grin revealed sharpened teeth, but elimination is so much simpler, and dead targets don't try to escape during transport. This one is genuinely dangerous, Kit. His electrical techniques will be difficult to counter with standard approaches, and his experience gives him significant advantages in both strategy and timing. This may require deeper cooperation between us. Who's paying? Naruto asked, though he suspected the answer wouldn't change the immediate tactical situation. Anonymous commission through intermediaries. Could be your former village wanting their weapon back, could be rivals eliminating competition, could be collectors who specialize in exotic acquisitions. Rhaegar began moving in a wide circle around the campfire, his weapons leaving trails of electricity in the air. Doesn't really matter to me, money is money, and you're worth enough to retire comfortably. The attack came without further warning, lightning-fast strikes from both swords simultaneously, aimed to disable rather than kill, but delivered with enough force to incapacitate most opponents. Rhaegar was clearly confident in his ability to control the encounter's outcome. He was about to learn that confidence could be a fatal miscalculation. Naruto's first response was pure instinct, shadow clones infused with enough fox chakra to make them visibly different from standard techniques. But even enhanced, the clones were hard-pressed to match Rhaegar's speed and the reach advantage of his electrified weapons. Standard approaches will not suffice, Kit. This opponent requires our full cooperation, not just my power channeled through your techniques, but true partnership where your will and mine become one. Are you prepared for that level of integration? Naruto felt one of his clones dissipate under Rhaegar's assault, then another, the feedback confirming that his opponent's weapons could disrupt chakra constructs on contact. Traditional strategies wouldn't work here. He needed something beyond anything he'd learned in Konoha or developed during his time as a freelancer. Yes, he said, both aloud and mentally. Do whatever you need to do, then stop fighting my influence and embrace it. Stop trying to control the power and let it control you. Stop being Naruto, who occasionally uses the Nine-Tails' strength, and become something entirely new. The transformation was unlike anything he'd experienced before. Instead of the painful burning sensation he associated with accessing Kurama's chakra, there was a smooth integration that felt like coming home to a place he'd never known existed. His awareness expanded beyond human limitations, his physical capabilities multiplied beyond recognition, and his tactical understanding became enhanced by instincts that had been honed over millennia of conflict. But most importantly, he was no longer fighting alone. Kurama's presence wasn't separate from his own consciousness, it was integrated with it, creating a synthesis that was more than the sum of its parts. When Rhaegar's next attack came, Naruto didn't dodge or block. He caught both electrified swords barehanded, his chakra-enhanced grip dispersing the electrical energy harmlessly while his enhanced strength held weapons that could cut through steel. The bounty hunter's expression shifted from confidence to alarm in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "What the hell?" Rhaegar began, but Naruto was already moving. The counterattack was devastating in its simplicity. Enhanced by Kurama's power and guided by the fox's combat instincts, Naruto simply released the swords and struck with an open palm that carried enough force to send a grown man flying 50 feet through the air. Rhaegar hit a tree with a sound like breaking wood, but he rolled with the impact and came up fighting, his weapons already moving in complex patterns designed to create distance and regain tactical advantage. It didn't matter. The person-entity, thing that Naruto had become, was operating on a level that made traditional combat techniques irrelevant. Shadow clones materialized faster than Rhaegar could track them, each one infused with enough demonic energy to function as an independent combatant rather than a mere distraction. Foxfire chakra lanced through the air like guided projectiles, forcing the bounty hunter into increasingly desperate evasive maneuvers. And through it all, the original Naruto moved with predatory grace that made every step look effortless and every attack seem inevitable. Yes, Kit, this is what true power feels like when freed from artificial constraints. This is what we can accomplish when we stop pretending to be separate entities. Rhaegar's electrical techniques, formidable against normal opponents, proved inadequate against someone whose chakra system was fundamentally different from baseline human norms. His speed and experience meant nothing against reflexes enhanced by demonic instincts and powered by nearly unlimited energy reserves. The end came when he made the mistake of trying to match Naruto's enhanced clones in direct combat. Surrounded and overwhelmed, he found himself held immobile by constructs that felt more like elemental forces than standard jutsu. "Impossible," he gasped, staring at Naruto with the kind of fear usually reserved for natural disasters. "No Jinchuriki integrates that completely with their sealed demon. The chakra poisoning alone should have killed you." "Maybe I'm not like other Jinchuriki," Naruto replied, and his voice carried harmonics that belonged to both human and fox. "What are you?" Rhaegar whispered. "I'm something new." The kill was quick and efficient, a chakra-enhanced strike that stopped the bounty hunter's heart instantly. But even as Rhaegar's body fell to the forest floor, Naruto could sense that the confrontation had been observed by others hidden in the surrounding darkness. Multiple observers, Kit, at least 3 distinct presences, all with considerable skill in concealment. We have attracted an audience. Rather than acknowledging the watchers directly, Naruto began the practical work of disposing of evidence and collecting anything useful from Rhaegar's equipment. The lightning swords were too distinctive to keep, but his money pouch was substantial and his travel supplies were of excellent quality. But as he worked, he was acutely aware of the eyes watching from the shadows, evaluating, assessing, drawing conclusions about what they'd witnessed. Let them watch, he decided. Let them see what happened to people who hunted him for money. Let word spread through whatever networks they represented that Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the desperate village exile they might have expected to find. He was something else now, something that had never existed before in the long history of Jinchuriki and their sealed demons. And that something was not to be trifled with by opportunistic bounty hunters or anyone else who mistook him for easy prey. From his concealed position 200 meters away, Hoshigaki Kasame observed the cleanup with professional appreciation. He'd been tracking the Jinchuriki for weeks as part of Akatsuki's evaluation process, documenting capabilities and psychological development to determine the optimal approach for eventual recruitment. What he'd witnessed tonight exceeded even the most optimistic projections of the boy's potential. The integration between human and demon had been seamless, creating a combat effectiveness that rivaled some of the legendary Sannin. More importantly, the boy had shown no hesitation about killing when threatened, no moral anguish about the necessity of violence, no attempt to find non-lethal alternatives to permanent solutions. He was becoming exactly what Akatsuki needed, powerful enough to serve their purposes, pragmatic enough to accept their methods, and isolated enough to appreciate what they offered. Impressive, Kisame murmured to himself, making mental notes that would become part of his next report to Pain. Very impressive indeed. The Jinchuriki finished his cleanup and resumed his journey north, moving with the confident ease of someone who no longer questioned his right to eliminate threats to his well-being. There was no regret in his posture, no indication that the evening's violence had troubled him psychologically. Perfect. Kisame waited until the boy was well out of sight before emerging from concealment. He had a report to deliver, and based on what he'd observed, Pain would want to accelerate their recruitment timeline significantly. The Ninetales Jinchuriki was ready, perhaps even eager, to hear what Akatsuki had to offer someone with his particular combination of power and pragmatism. The other witnesses to the battle were considerably less sanguine about what they'd seen. "Did you see the way he moved?" one whispered as they crept through the forest toward the nearest town. "That wasn't human speed or human strength. The clones were wrong too," another added. "Shadow clones don't glow like that, don't move independently like that. What kind of technique creates constructs with their own intelligence? And the way he killed Rhaegar, no hesitation, no emotion, like stepping on an insect." By the time they reached civilization, their story had already begun evolving into something closer to legend than factual report. The young blonde ninja who fought with demon fire and shadow creatures. The wanderer who killed one of the 7 swordsmen as easily as swatting a fly. The Jinchuriki who had somehow achieved perfect integration with his sealed beast. The stories spread through the underground networks like wildfire, each retelling adding new details and escalating the threat assessment. Within days, every bounty hunter, missing nin, and criminal organization from Fire Country to the eastern borders would know that Naruto Uzumaki was no longer a target to be approached casually. He was a force of nature wrapped in human skin, and engaging with him required preparation for the possibility that the encounter might not end well for the challenger. Excellent, Kit. Fear is a far more effective deterrent than friendship ever was. Those who witnessed our partnership tonight will spread word that we are not to be trifled with. Future challenges will be fewer and of higher quality. "Is that what we are now?" Naruto asked as he made camp several miles from the battle site. "Partners, we are whatever we choose to be, Kit. But yes, tonight we chose to be partners rather than reluctant cohabitants. The question is whether you find that transformation disturbing or liberating." Naruto considered the question while building his fire and preparing his evening meal. The integration with Kurama had felt natural, like accessing abilities he'd always possessed but never known how to use. There had been no sense of losing himself or being controlled by alien will, just the sensation of becoming more than he'd been before. "Liberating," he said finally, "definitely liberating. Good, because there are others in this world who will recognize what we've become and seek to either recruit or eliminate us. Our next encounters will likely be with individuals who represent organizations rather than personal ambitions. Organizations like the Akatsuki, among others. The question is whether we approach such encounters as opportunities or threats. Power like ours is valuable to those with vision and ambition. The right alliance could provide resources, training, and purpose that independent operation cannot match." As he settled into his bedroll and prepared for sleep, Naruto found himself thinking about what kind of organization might value someone with his particular combination of abilities and moral flexibility. An organization that understood the practical applications of power. An organization that didn't waste time on moral complexities when simple solutions were available. An organization that could appreciate the advantages of someone who'd learned to integrate human cleverness with demonic strength. It was an intriguing prospect, and one that felt increasingly likely to manifest in the near future. After all, if he could sense the Watchers observing his battles, it was only logical that they were evaluating him for purposes beyond casual intelligence gathering. Sleep well, Kit. Tomorrow brings new possibilities and new challenges, but whatever comes, we face it together now, as true partners rather than reluctant allies. For the first time since leaving Konoha, that thought filled him with something approaching genuine anticipation. The stories began in the taverns and trading posts scattered across the borderlands between fire and hot water countries, whispered accounts that grew more dramatic with each retelling. I heard it was 8 men he killed in that mountain pass, all of them at once. My cousins saw the aftermath, bodies everywhere, torn apart like wild animals had gotten to them. They say he moves faster than lightning and his clones breathe fire. The demon fox wanderer, that's what they're calling him. Young guy, blonde hair, fights with techniques that ain't natural. The merchants who carried these tales from town to town embellished them freely, understanding that dramatic stories were as valuable as trade goods in establishments that catered to people seeking distraction from hard lives. Within 2 weeks of the encounter with Rhaegar, every inn and tavern from the hot water border to the edges of Rain Country had heard some version of the legend. And like all legends, the truth became less important than the meaning people found in the telling. In the Hidden Leaf Village, the first credible reports reached Tsunade's desk on a Tuesday morning that started badly and got worse from there. Multiple confirmed sightings of a blonde ninja matching Uzumaki's description, the Ambu operative reported, his mask concealing whatever emotions the intelligence might have stirred. Operating as a freelance mercenary throughout the border regions, significant escalation in both capabilities and methods since his departure from the village. Tsunade set down her sake cup. It was barely noon, but the Naruto situation had been driving her to drink earlier and earlier each day, and focused on the report with the grim attention it deserved. Escalation how? Elimination of multiple targets with extreme prejudice, destruction of infrastructure when tactically necessary, use of techniques that don't match any known Konoha training protocols. The Anbu operative paused. Several witnesses describe abilities that suggest significant advancement in his relationship with the Nine-Tails entity. What kind of advancement? Integration, Hokage-sama. Not the controlled channeling we've observed previously, but what appears to be voluntary partnership between human will and demonic power. The words hit Tsunade like a physical blow. She'd been afraid of something like this since the day they discovered Naruto's departure. That isolation and desperation would drive him toward deeper cooperation with the entity sealed inside him. The Nine-Tails was ancient, intelligent, and utterly without moral constraints when it came to achieving its goals. If Naruto was actively partnering with it rather than simply using its power. Any indication of his ultimate destination or objectives? Negative, Hokage-sama. His movements appear random, following opportunities for employment rather than any strategic plan. However, the operative hesitated. Spit it out, there are reports of increased Akatsuki activity in the same regions where he's been operating. Could be coincidence, but the timing suggests possible surveillance or evaluation for recruitment purposes. Tsunade's blood went cold. The idea of Naruto, with his power, his knowledge of Konoha's defenses, and his growing willingness to use lethal force, falling into Akatsuki's hands was a nightmare scenario that made every other problem she faced seem trivial by comparison. Double the search teams, she ordered, full authorization for whatever resources they need, and get me Kakashi, I want him personally leading the retrieval operation. Hokage-sama, should the teams be briefed for capture or other contingencies? The question hung in the air like a curse. Because the horrible truth was that if Naruto had truly allied himself with the Nine-Tails and was considering joining Akatsuki, retrieval might not be an option. The threat he represented to village security could exceed his value as a weapon in their service. Capture if possible, she said finally, but team safety takes priority over target preservation. After the operative left, Tsunade sat alone in her office contemplating the magnitude of her failure. She'd let her disappointment and frustration drive away the village's most powerful asset, and now that asset was becoming a potential threat that might require elimination to prevent catastrophic consequences. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. In trying to discipline Naruto into becoming a better weapon, she'd driven him to become a weapon pointed at their own hearts. Kakashi received the mission briefing 2 hours later, in a secure conference room where Jiraiya was waiting with an expression that mixed determination with barely concealed dread. The trail is approximately 2 weeks old, Kakashi reported, spreading maps across the table that showed confirmed sightings and probable routes. He's been moving northeast, following trade routes and taking mercenary contracts. Standard freelancer pattern, except for the dramatically enhanced capabilities and complete willingness to use lethal force. How enhanced? Jiraiya asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer would be worse than he wanted to hear. Witnesses describe techniques that blend standard jutsu with what can only be Nine-Tails chakra in ways we've never seen before. Shadow clones that operate independently, elemental manipulation that exceeds known human capabilities, physical enhancement that rivals the strongest taijutsu specialists. Jiraiya closed his eyes, undoubtedly thinking about the prophecy that had driven so much of his relationship with Naruto. The child who would bring either peace or destruction to the world, and who seemed to be choosing the latter path with devastating efficiency. Integration level, he asked. Unknown, but probably advanced. The reports suggest voluntary cooperation rather than forced channeling. He's not fighting the Nine Tails anymore, he's working with it. Then we may already be too late, Jiraiya said quietly. Once a Jinchuriki achieves that level of integration, extraction becomes nearly impossible without killing both the host and the sealed entity. Are you suggesting we shouldn't try to bring him home? I'm suggesting we need to be prepared for the possibility that the boy we're looking for no longer exists. If he's truly partnered with the Nine Tails, then what we're tracking isn't Naruto, who occasionally uses demon power. It's a hybrid entity that thinks with human intelligence and acts with demonic instincts. Kakashi studied the map, trying to project Naruto's likely route based on the pattern of sightings and mercenary activities. The path led northeast toward increasingly lawless territories where questions weren't asked and official authority was scarce. Perfect hunting grounds for someone who wanted to operate without oversight or interference. How long before we can intercept him? If we move fast and guess right about his destination, maybe 3 days. But Kakashi, Jiraiya's voice carried the weight of long experience and recent heartbreak. We need to discuss what happens if he doesn't want to come home. The question that neither of them wanted to voice directly. What did you do when your most powerful weapon decided to point itself at you instead of your enemies? He's still our student, Kakashi said, though the words felt hollow even to him. He's still the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, Jiraiya replied. And if he's made a deliberate choice to ally himself with the entity inside him, then student-teacher relationships become secondary to village security. They spent the next hour planning routes, resources, and contingencies for a mission that felt more like a potential assassination than a rescue operation. Both men understood the stakes involved. If they succeeded in bringing Naruto home, they might save both him and the village from catastrophic consequences. If they failed, or if he proved too dangerous to approach safely, they would have to make choices that would haunt them for whatever remained of their lives. One more thing, Jiraiya said as they prepared to depart. Intelligence reports suggest Akatsuki operatives have been spotted in the same general area if they're evaluating Naruto for recruitment. Then we're racing against time, Kakashi finished. And if they get to him first, retrieval becomes infinitely more complicated. An understatement of staggering proportions. If Naruto joined Akatsuki willingly, with full integration of Nine Tails' power and complete knowledge of Konoha's defenses and capabilities, the resulting threat would exceed anything the village had faced since its founding. As they left the village gates with their carefully chosen team, neither man spoke about the possibility that they might be embarking on their final mission as Konoha ninja. Because if Naruto had truly chosen darkness over light, if he'd embraced partnership with the Nine Tails and was considering alliance with Akatsuki, then stopping him might require sacrifices that would destroy the people making them as surely as any enemy attack. The hunt for the Nine Tails Jinchuriki had begun, and everyone involved understood that it might end with the death of either the prey or the predators. In the hidden depths of Rain Country, Pain listened to Kasame's latest report with growing satisfaction. The Jinchuriki's transformation continues to exceed our projections, Kasame reported, his shark-like features animated with genuine enthusiasm. Full integration with the Nine Tails entity demonstrated tactical flexibility, complete willingness to eliminate threats permanently. He's becoming exactly what we need, and his psychological state, stable from what I can observe, no signs of the mental degradation that typically accompanies advanced Jinchuriki integration. If anything, he seems more focused and decisive than the reports from his village days suggested. Pain nodded slowly, processing this information against the larger strategic picture that drove all of Akatsuki's operations. A willing recruit with Nine Tails power would be invaluable for their ultimate goals, but only if that recruit could be trusted to prioritize organizational objectives over personal considerations. What about his former village? Any indication they're attempting retrieval? Intelligence suggests they're mobilizing search teams, probably led by his former instructor. But they're at least 2 weeks behind his current position, and their approach will be hampered by attempting to minimize civilian casualties and preserve target viability for return to service. Weaknesses we don't share, Payne observed. Exactly. If we move now, we can make contact before any rescue attempt reaches him. and given his current psychological state, I believe he'll be receptive to what we can offer. Pain considered this assessment while studying reports from other Akatsuki operations across the region. The timing was indeed optimal. The Jinchuriki was isolated, powerful, and apparently free from moral constraints that might interfere with their methods. He demonstrated both capability and pragmatism, the two qualities most essential for Akatsuki recruitment. Initiate direct contact, he decided, but approach carefully. We want him to choose us rather than feeling coerced. Someone with his power and current mindset will respond better to respect and opportunity than to threats or manipulation. Understood. Any specific parameters for the recruitment offer? Full membership, equal status, resources commensurate with his abilities. Make it clear that we value what he's become rather than trying to change him back into what he was. After Kasame departed to carry out his orders, Pain remained in the hidden chamber contemplating the strategic advantages represented by willing Ninetales integration. Every previous Jinchuriki they'd encountered had been fighting their sealed entity, limiting both power and tactical flexibility. This one was different. This one had chosen partnership over resistance, cooperation over control. The resulting capabilities would exceed anything they'd previously incorporated into their organization. The Child of Prophecy was walking toward them of his own accord, driven not by their manipulation, but by the natural consequences of his village's failures and his own evolution beyond their limiting expectations. Soon, very soon, he would have the chance to discover what Akatsuki could offer someone who'd outgrown the need for conventional morality and traditional loyalty. Pain suspected the offer would be very well received indeed. 200 miles northeast of Konoha, Naruto sat beside another campfire in another forest clearing, unaware that he'd become the focus of multiple organizations' attention and planning. His evening had been spent practicing techniques that blended his own chakra manipulation with Kurama's power in increasingly sophisticated ways. The fox had proven to be an excellent teacher once their relationship had evolved beyond reluctant coexistence into genuine partnership. Your progress continues to exceed expectations, Kit. The integration techniques you've developed tonight would have taken most Jinchuriki years to master, assuming they ever achieved such cooperation at all. It feels natural, Naruto replied, studying the way Foxfire chakra swirled around his hand in patterns that seemed to have their own intelligence. Like this is what I was always meant to become. Perhaps it is. Your village saw you as a weapon to be controlled, but weapons are limited by their wielder's imagination and courage. Partnership creates possibilities that neither human nor demon could achieve alone. As if summoned by their conversation about possibilities, Naruto's enhanced senses detected a presence approaching through the darkness, careful, professional, but making no real effort at concealment. Whoever was coming wanted to be noticed, which suggested either confidence or stupidity. Single individual, considerable power, no immediate hostile intent. This one approaches for conversation rather than combat. Should I be worried? Naruto asked. That depends entirely on what they want to discuss. But I suggest you listen to what they have to say. Opportunities rarely announce themselves so politely. The figure that emerged from the tree line was immediately recognizable from the wanted posters Naruto had seen during his mercenary activities. Tall, blue-skinned, with a massive wrapped sword strapped to his back, and the kind of predatory grace that marked truly dangerous individuals. Hoshigaki Kasame, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Mist, and a confirmed S-class missing nin, with a bounty that exceeded the annual budgets of most small villages. Good evening, Kasame said with genuine courtesy, stopping at the edge of Naruto's firelight. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Depends on what you want, Naruto replied, neither welcoming nor hostile. If you're here for the bounty, you should know that the last professional who tried that approach didn't survive the attempt. I heard about Rhaegar, impressive work. Kasame's shark-like grin revealed rows of pointed teeth. But I'm not here for bounty collection. I'm here to make you an offer that I think you'll find considerably more interesting than anything the freelance market can provide. This is it, Kit, the approach we've been expecting. Listen carefully to what he proposes. It may represent exactly the opportunity we've been seeking. What kind of offer? Naruto asked. The kind that comes from an organization that values strength over sentiment, results over rhetoric, and practical solutions over moral complexity. Kasame settled into a relaxed crouch across the fire from Naruto. An organization that's been watching your recent activities with considerable admiration and growing interest. Akatsuki, Naruto said. It wasn't a question. Akatsuki, Kasame confirmed. We've been impressed by your evolution since leaving the Hidden Leaf. your integration with the Nine Tails, your tactical flexibility, your willingness to make permanent solutions to permanent problems. These are qualities we value highly. And what exactly are you offering? Partnership with individuals who share your pragmatic approach to problem solving, resources and training that will help you develop your unique abilities to their full potential. Purpose that matches your power rather than limiting it to politically acceptable applications. Kisame paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. Most importantly, we're offering you the chance to work with people who see your transformation as strength rather than corruption, who value what you've become rather than mourning what you've left behind. Listen to his words, Kit. This is exactly what we discussed, an organization that appreciates power without apologizing for it, that values results without constraining methods. This could be the opportunity we've been seeking. What would you want in return? Naruto asked. Your skills in service of our larger goals, your power applied to objectives that match your capabilities, your partnership in creating a world where strength determines outcomes rather than politics and sentiment. It was exactly what Naruto had been unconsciously seeking since leaving Konoha, a purpose that matched his evolved abilities, companions who wouldn't try to change him back into something he'd outgrown, and the chance to apply his power in service of goals that made practical sense. I'm listening, he said. Kisame's grin widened. Excellent. Let me tell you about our vision for bringing true peace to this world, and about the role someone with your particular talents might play in achieving it. As the night deepened around them, two missing nin sat beside a dying fire and discussed possibilities that would reshape the balance of power across the entire ninja world. Behind them, unseen in the darkness, other forces were converging on their location with very different intentions and much more desperate urgency. The hunt for the Nine Tails Jinchuriki was about to become considerably more complicated. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.